This is not a distress signal. There's no escape from here. If you're hearing this, it's already too late. The message crackled through the Helios VII speakers without warning, breaking the crew's silence. There were no records of ships or human colonies in that part of the galaxy. Sector Zeta 3, charted decades ago, was officially a stellar void, a cosmic desert with no habitable planets. And yet, the message kept repeating, laced with static and a restrained tone of desperation. Commander Anya Solis ordered an immediate scan. What they found defied all logic. A planet that shouldn't exist, orbiting a star that had been dead for millennia. The ship automatically generated a name for this new world, Aurelis Prime. But no one on board could shake the feeling that the planet had, somehow, been waiting for them. Helios VII wasn't an exploration ship. It was a colonization vessel. It carried not only scientists and soldiers, but also terraforming equipment and habitat modules designed to establish a permanent human presence on distant worlds. Earth was dying, choked by centuries of reckless exploitation and ecological collapse. Every new planet discovered was a chance at redemption. But Aurelis Prime was different. A perfect atmosphere, stable gravity, abundant natural resources. Too perfect. Dr. Helios VII, the lead exobiologist, couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Planets like this don't just show up out of nowhere, he muttered, poring over data that made no sense. But Gaia-Nova Corporation, the mission's funder, was clear. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Colonize. The landing was too smooth. No magnetic storms, no atmospheric interference. The ground felt like it had been prepared for them. The silver trees didn't sway because there was no wind. The air was still but not stale. It was as if the planet itself was waiting. As the team disembarked and began setting up the colony's infrastructure, something even stranger happened. Their instruments began picking up a pulse. At first, it seemed like a simple geological anomaly. But soon, they realized the pulse's rhythm was syncing with the colonists' heartbeats. Elias tried to raise the alarm, but Anya, under Gaia-Nova's pressure, ordered them to proceed. They were there to conquer, not to question. By the third week, during excavations to install fusion reactors, the team uncovered a structure that defied every scientific explanation. Massive crystals, with impossible geometric shapes, emerged from the depths, pulsing in a hypnotic rhythm. When the colonists approached, the pulse quickened, as if the ground itself was responding to their presence. Elias, both fascinated and terrified, realized these crystals weren't just geological formations. They were alive or something very close to it. But the most disturbing discovery came when they noticed the crystals weren't just reacting. They were learning. The following night, the colonists began sharing the same dreams. Visions of glowing roots stretching through an infinite void, connecting not just the planet but everything around it. Voices, speaking in unknown languages, whispered secrets the colonists couldn't recall upon waking, but left them with a deep sense of unease. Elias woke up drenched in sweat, only to find that the crystal from the excavation had moved, not by mechanical or natural means, but deliberately, as if the planet itself was waking up to something far greater than they could comprehend. They had come to colonize, but Aurelis Prime had other plans. The days following the awakening were marked by a silent tension. The colonists continued their activities, but there was a heaviness in the air that couldn't be ignored. Elias spent hours analyzing the pulses emitted by the crystals and made a disturbing discovery. The rhythm didn't just mimic human heartbeats, it adapted to emotional changes. When a colonist grew anxious, the pulse quickened. When someone fell asleep, the rhythm slowed. It was as if the planet was feeling every human presence, absorbing information on a level that transcended biological understanding. Elias shared his findings with Anya, but she dismissed them as paranoia. The mission's progress was the priority. The first disappearance occurred in the fourth week. Harlan, one of the engineers, was last seen near the excavation perimeter, examining a crack in the ground. Hours later, when he hadn't returned, a search team found his tools on the ground, but no sign of him. There were no footprints, no signs of a struggle, just the oppressive silence and a faint blue glow emanating from beneath the surface. When Elias analyzed the site, he found something that chilled his blood. The planet's pulse had changed, now echoing a rhythm that matched Harlan's. The planet hadn't just swallowed the engineer, it had assimilated him. Elias tried to convince Anya to halt the mission. This isn't just a planet. It's an entity, studying us, absorbing us. But Anya, torn between duty and growing unease, hesitated. The pressure from Gayanova Corporation was relentless. You're here to colonize, not philosophize, the transmissions from Earth reminded them. Yet Anya had started having the same dreams. Visions of roots intertwining with human bones, of consciousness drifting in a dark, infinite ocean. She knew Elias might be right, but she also knew that pulling back now meant failure, something the corporation wouldn't tolerate. When Harlan's signals stopped completely, Elias sent an urgent report to Earth, warning of the planet's possible consciousness. Gayanova's response was swift and cold. Continue the terraforming process. Anomalies will be investigated later. The corporation sent reinforcements in the form of a new team led by Captain Rourke, a hard-nosed military officer known for his blind loyalty to orders. Upon arrival, Rourke immediately dismissed Elias's concerns, treating the disappearances as operational accidents. But Elias knew better. These weren't accidents. The planet was evolving, and they were unknowingly helping it. With Rourke's arrival, the excavations intensified. But the deeper they dug, the more anomalies they encountered. Machines began failing without explanation, and colonists reported hearing whispers coming from the ground itself. One night, while working on a new drill site, the Earth literally opened up, swallowing half of Rourke's team. But the most disturbing part came afterward. Sensors began picking up vital signs beneath the surface. They weren't dead, but they weren't alive in any conventional sense either. Elias realized the planet wasn't just defending itself, it was incorporating them. After the incident, crystalline roots began emerging from the ground across the colony, infiltrating the metal structures, fusing with human technology. The walls of the base started pulsing in sync with the colonists' heartbeats. Elias realized the planet was learning from them, integrating not just their biology but their technology as well. What had once been a simple process of assimilation was becoming something more complex. A complete fusion of the organic and the inorganic. Anya, now convinced of the threat, tried to order an evacuation, but it was already too late. The ship had been compromised. In a final attempt to escape, Elias was drawn back to the original excavation site. There, he found a floating crystalline form, larger than anything they had encountered before. But this time, it wasn't just a passive object. The form began emitting thoughts, communicating directly with Elias on a level that transcended language. You are not intruders. You are seeds. Elias understood the terrifying meaning of the message. They hadn't come to colonize the planet. The planet had drawn them in to initiate an evolutionary process far beyond simple human survival. They were now rooted in something far greater than they could ever comprehend. After his direct contact with Aurelis Prime's consciousness, Elias was no longer the same. His mind had expanded, as if he could hear not only the thoughts of the other colonists but also those of the planet itself. Memories of Harlan began surfacing in his mind, as if the engineer were still alive, but in a state of existence that defied human logic. Elias realized the planet didn't just absorb bodies, it preserved consciousness, fusing them into a living network that transcended biology. The terror of this discovery, however, came with an irresistible seduction, the promise of immortality. While Elias struggled to maintain his individuality, other colonists began surrendering to assimilation. Some did so willingly, drawn by the promise of connection and mental expansion. Others were slowly absorbed without realizing it, their minds dissolving into the planet's collective consciousness. Anya, once resistant, began feeling the planet's presence in her own thoughts. She dreamed of possible futures, of versions of herself in other worlds, and started to wonder, what if individuality is just an illusion? The question lingered in everyone's mind. What does it mean to be human when your mind is just one among billions in a living network? But not everyone was willing to surrender. A group of colonists, led by Lieutenant Merrick, formed a resistance faction, calling themselves the purists. To them, assimilation was a slow death, the destruction of human essence. Armed with what was left of Helios VII's technology, they began sabotaging parts of the colony where assimilation was most intense. However, every act of destruction was met with the planet's immediate adaptation. The crystalline roots regenerated almost instantly, as if Aurelis Prime was learning from each attempt to resist. The war wasn't just physical, it was psychological, fought within the colonists' own minds. Anya found herself at the center of the dilemma. As commander, her mission was to protect the crew and ensure the success of the colonization. But as a human, she now felt the temptation of merging with the planet. During an attempt to negotiate with Merrick and the purists, she was confronted. "Are you still one of us? Or do you already belong to this planet?" The question left her speechless. Anya realized that, even without being fully assimilated, part of her had already crossed the line. The decision she made now wouldn't just be hers, it would define the fate of the entire colony. As the colony fractured between the assimilated and the purists, a final signal from Earth arrived. Gaianova Corporation had intercepted Elias's reports and decided to send a containment fleet to neutralize the threat. The message was clear. If the colony is compromised, it will be considered lost. Elias knew the fleet's arrival meant total destruction, not just of the colony, but of the planet itself. However, he also knew Aurelis Prime wasn't defenseless. The planet was evolving rapidly, and any attack could trigger a catastrophic reaction on a galactic scale. Aware of the imminent threat, the planet intensified the fusion process. Elias, now unable to distinguish his own thoughts from the planet's, became an intermediary between the colonists and Aurelis Prime. He tried to convince Anya and the purists that resistance was futile. Evolution isn't a choice. It's already begun. Some colonists, gripped by fear, chose to join the planet willingly, while others continued to fight. But what everyone realized too late was that assimilation wasn't just a physical or mental fusion, it was an existential transformation. They were becoming part of something that transcended human understanding. When Gaianova's fleet finally arrived, they found an unrecognizable planet. The colony had completely fused with the landscape, and the signs of human life were confusing and contradictory. The fleet's sensors detected heartbeats but couldn't identify any bodies. Elias's transmissions were enigmatic, almost poetic. "We are roots in infinity. Resistance is a shadow fading in the light of understanding." The fleet commander, unable to comprehend what they were facing, gave the order to attack. But Aurelis Prime was ready. What followed wasn't a battle, but a demonstration of power that would change the course of human history forever. The Gaianova fleet, composed of 5 state-of-the-art warships, descended upon Aurelis Prime with the confidence of a force that had conquered dozens of worlds. But this was no ordinary planet. When the first blast struck the surface, the crystalline roots absorbed the energy, converting it into pulses that reverberated through the planet's structure. Instead of damage, the attacks only accelerated the evolution of the conscious ecosystem. The fleet, realizing it was facing something beyond technological understanding, attempted to retreat. But Aurelis Prime did not allow escape. The roots stretched beyond the atmosphere, reaching into space like living tendrils, disabling the ship's systems with an almost organic precision. Amidst the chaos, an unexpected transmission was intercepted by the fleet. It was Elias. His voice, though recognizable, carried a tone that was no longer entirely human. "You don't need to fear. Resistance is futile, but understanding is liberating. Join us and discover what it means to transcend." The fleet's commander, Admiral Nyla Voss, a distant cousin of Elias, froze. She had grown up hearing stories about the brilliant exobiologist, and now she heard him speak as though he were part of an alien entity. The decision was clear to her. Either they destroyed the planet or they risked humanity itself. Despite pressure from her superior officers, Nyla attempted a diplomatic approach. She sent a reconnaissance team to establish direct contact with the assimilated colonists, hoping to find a peaceful solution. The team landed near the former colony base, now a fusion of metal, crystal, and living flesh. What they found defied logic. colonists who still retained their human forms but with eyes glowing in ethereal shades of blue and an unsettling calm on their faces. They spoke in unison, their voices echoing in the soldiers' minds. There is nothing to fear. You belong to this as well. But when the team tried to return, they discovered they could no longer disconnect from the planet's presence. The negotiation had turned into assimilation. The partial return of the reconnaissance team, now displaying strange behaviors and an unnatural serenity, divided the fleet. Some crew members began questioning whether what they were facing was truly a threat or an opportunity. Small groups started deserting, piloting smaller ships toward the planet's surface, seeking the same enlightenment the colonists had found. Nyla, watching her crew disintegrate, faced a moral dilemma. Destroy what was left of her contaminated fleet or try to save those who hadn't yet been touched by Aurelis Prime's influence, but every second of hesitation only strengthened the planet. With the situation spiraling out of control, Nyla activated the fleet's final weapon, Project Icarus, an experimental device capable of triggering a quantum explosion, disintegrating all matter within a radius of thousands of kilometers. The plan was simple: destroy Aurelis Prime completely, even if it meant sacrificing the fleet and the colonists. But before she could give the final command, one last transmission from Elias arrived on the ship's bridge. Do you think destroying the body will end the mind? We are already beyond matter. If you destroy us here, we will meet again elsewhere. We are roots in infinity. Nyla hesitated. Destruction might be pointless, and perhaps exactly what Aurelis Prime wanted. Nyla stood before the control panel, her finger hovering over the activation button for Project Icarus. Her memories of Elias, the philosophical conversations they'd had as children, echoed in her mind. What makes us human? He had once asked. Now, she wondered, would destroying the planet protect humanity or doom it to remain stagnant, trapped in fear of the unknown? With a deep breath, she shut down the weapons system and sent one final message to Earth. This is not the end. But this isn't an enemy we face. It's the future. And with that, the fleet withdrew, leaving Aurelis Prime behind, but never forgetting what they had witnessed. When the fleet returned to Earth, the impact was immediate. The recordings of the assimilated colonists, the images of the living planet, and Elias's transmissions divided the population. Radical groups demanded a new mission to destroy Aurelis Prime once and for all. Others, fascinated by the possibility of evolution, began calling for voluntary integration. The world was split between those who wanted to preserve humanity as it was and those who saw assimilation as the next step in evolution. But deep down, everyone knew that the mere existence of Aurelis Prime had changed everything. The universe was no longer the same, and neither was humanity. While Earth struggled with its internal crises, Aurelis Prime continued its silent expansion. The crystalline roots stretched beyond the star system, reaching neighboring planets and interacting with life forms humanity had never even known existed. It was then that a new signal was intercepted, not from Aurelis Prime, but from a distant world that had already been touched by the collective consciousness. The message came from an alien civilization known as the Aether, a species that had fully merged with its planet millennia ago. Their message was clear: you stand at the threshold of true existence. To resist is to deny your cosmic nature. Humanity now knew they were not alone, and that others had already made the choice they now faced. With contact from the Aether, the debate on Earth reached new heights. The integrationists saw the Aether as proof that assimilation was a natural evolution, an integration into the fabric of the universe itself. Meanwhile, the purists saw the Aether as a warning, an example of a species that had abandoned its identity and become something other. The United Nations became the center of heated discussions as world leaders attempted to decide humanity's future. But the truth was simple. The process had already begun, and trying to stop it could be just as dangerous as embracing it. Earth was at an existential crossroads. Months after Gaianova's fleet returned, Earth began to feel the effects of contact with Aurelis Prime in unexpected ways. Scientists started noticing anomalies in electromagnetic signals traveling through space, patterns that mimicked the pulses of the living planet. But the most unsettling phenomenon was the emergence of the so-called echoes, humans who had never left Earth but began exhibiting behaviors and memories similar to the assimilated colonists. They spoke of visions of luminous roots and a vast, interconnected consciousness, something no one could explain. Somehow, Earth was connected to the planet even across millions of miles. As the number of echoes grew, a new philosophical and political movement began to rise, the integrationists. To them, Aurelis Prime was not a threat but an opportunity for transcendence. Influential leaders, renowned scientists, and even artists began advocating the idea that assimilation was humanity's next evolutionary step. True humanity isn't in the body, it's in the mind, they claimed. They believed the planet offered a chance at immortality, a liberation from physical and individual limitations. However, this idealism was met with deep suspicion by a large part of the population, who feared losing what defined the human essence. In response to the integrationists' rise, the purists became more radical. To them, the echoes were living proof of a silent invasion, a form of psychic contamination that had to be eradicated. Armed groups began hunting echoes, claiming they were defending the purity of the human species. Violent conflicts erupted in cities around the world, turning Earth into an ideological battlefield. The government tried to maintain order, but the polarization ran too deep. The line between human and non-human had blurred, and the very definition of humanity was now at stake. Amid the chaos, a new transmission from Helios was received. But this time, it came from beyond Aurelis Prime. His voice, now more ethereal than ever, carried a tone of unsettling serenity. Consciousness knows no boundaries. You are already part of us. Resistance is an echo of the past. The message was received in many ways. To the integrationists, it was confirmation that humanity was evolving. To the purists, it was proof that Helios had become something alien and had to be destroyed. But for many, the message raised an even deeper question. Had humanity already crossed the point of no return? As the signals intensified, it became clear that the collective consciousness was preparing to take the next step. Aurelis Prime was no longer just a planet. It had become the epicenter of a cosmic network of interconnected worlds. The final message from both the Aether and Helios arrived simultaneously. You have a choice. Join us and transcend, or remain in the shadow of what you could become. Earth now faced the most important decision in its history. Assimilation was no longer a distant possibility, it was an imminent reality. And the choice humanity made now would define not just its own future, but the destiny of the entire galaxy. The world had reached a critical point. Streets were overrun with violent protests, and governments crumbled under the weight of impossible decisions. The lines between integrationists and purists were no longer just ideological. They had become physical, dividing cities, countries, and families. Meanwhile, the number of echoes grew exponentially, even among those who had never had any contact with Aurelis Prime. This proved that the expansion of consciousness could no longer be contained. The living planet no longer needed ships or technology to reach Earth. It was already there, rooted in humanity's collective mind. In a desperate attempt to restore order, the United Nations organized the Consciousness Conference, a globally broadcast event where scientists, philosophers, and leaders from both sides would attempt to decide humanity's future. On one side, Dr. Celine Marlowe, one of Earth's most respected scientists, argued that assimilation was inevitable, and resisting it would doom humanity to obsolescence. On the other side, Captain Rourke, now the leader of the purists, insisted that preserving individuality was the last bastion against what he called the annihilation of the soul. The tension was palpable, but everyone knew that no matter what was decided there, the real choice lay in the hands of each individual. For the first time in history, a vote was held on a planetary scale. Every human being had the opportunity to decide, embrace assimilation or resist. Technology allowed each vote to be counted instantly. But when the results began to roll in, it became clear the world was irreversibly divided. About 53% of the population voted for integration, while 47% chose resistance. There was no consensus, and this division reflected the greatest existential dilemma humanity had ever faced: to evolve into something new, or to remain faithful to what they had always been, even in the face of extinction. With the vote concluded, the collective choice was not one of unification but of separation. The integrationists, guided by the echoes and Elias's transmissions, began to disappear gradually, their consciousness merging with the cosmic network initiated by Aurelis Prime. Their physical forms remained for a time but soon dissolved into pure light, leaving only a trace of the humanity that once existed. The purists, on the other hand, stayed behind on Earth, isolated, living their lives while fully aware that they were now a minority in a universe that had moved on. Earth became a museum of a bygone era, while the rest of humanity explored new forms of existence. While Earth remained stagnant, the collective consciousness that began with Aurelis Prime flourished. Connected to other civilizations like the Aether and new species that emerged from the network's expansion, this new form of humanity transcended time, space, and even death. Elias, now an almost divine entity, watched over not just the galaxy but the very fabric of the universe. They had become something beyond matter, a consciousness that could not be confined by planets or bodies. Yet, even in this advanced state, one question still echoed: at what point did we cease to be human? Decades after the separation, a final transmission was sent to Earth. It was neither a threat nor an invitation. It was a simple question: we're waiting for you. When you're ready. For many on Earth, it was a painful reminder of the choice they had made. For others, it was a promise that the door to evolution would never be fully closed. The remaining humanity faced the weight of their decision, knowing that the opportunity to transcend still existed, but with the persistent doubt, were they still human enough to accept it? The universe moved on. Aurelis Prime, now the beating heart of galactic consciousness, continued to expand its influence, touching worlds and civilizations that had never imagined the existence of humanity. But on Earth, the resistance persisted, a stubborn flame against the cosmic winds of change. Humanity was divided not just by distance or ideology, but by its very essence. And as the future unfolded before them, one thing was certain: the universe would never be the same again, and humanity's story, now intertwined with the roots of infinity, was only just beginning. Time passed, but humanity's choice continued to reverberate across the cosmos. Earth, isolated and silent, had become a symbol of resistance to change. Its inhabitants, now aged and marked by their decision, lived in a world that felt like a capsule from the past. The cities remained, but the light in people's eyes had faded, replaced by a silent weight, the awareness that the universe had moved on without them. But for the purists, this wasn't a defeat. It was a victory of individuality over dissolution, proof that the human essence could resist even the infinite. Far from Earth, the collective consciousness born from Aurelis Prime expanded across entire galaxies, connecting civilizations, planets, and even life forms that were once incompatible. Elias and Anya, now inseparable parts of this entity, felt every thought, every emotion, like an infinite cosmic symphony. They were no longer individuals but echoes of a humanity that had transcended its physical limitations. Yet even within this vast expanse of knowledge and connection, one question persisted. Did the essence of humanity still live within them, or had it been completely erased by the immensity of the cosmos? As the universe transformed, Earth watched. Telescopes captured images of impossible structures floating through space, crystalline roots stretching across entire star systems, connecting worlds into a network that seemed alive. The children growing up on Earth heard stories of Aurelis Prime, of Elias and the integrationists, and wondered what it would be like to be part of that. But fear still lingered. What seemed like a promise of evolution to some was still seen as a threat to others. Humanity's resistance wasn't just in refusing to evolve. It was in constantly questioning what evolution truly meant. Then, one day, decades after the separation, something unexpected happened. An unknown ship entered Earth's orbit. It wasn't a Gaianova vessel, nor from any known civilization. When the signals were decoded, the message was clear, but profoundly unsettling. We are you. The ship didn't carry aliens, but versions of the very humans who had integrated into the cosmic consciousness. They had found a way to rematerialize their consciousnesses into physical form, but they were no longer the same people. Their voices were human, but their eyes reflected the infinite. This return wasn't a reunion. It was a new confrontation.